explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
Welcome, class. Welcome, Badlands fam. So, doing things a little different in today's MAHA Living episode because Nate couldn't be here, and also because I was getting a few DMs after last week's MAHA News live stream that Nate and I did. Because towards the end of that show, we were going on a tangent about exercise programming. Well, mainly me. I was ranting on how a lot of people trying to fix their back pain or their joint issues by working out, they're actually doing the wrong exercises. They're going about it with the wrong approach and sometimes even making their issues worse. So it's important to understand the basics of biomechanics so you know how to move properly, how to exercise properly, and then prevent yourself from getting pain or injury down the road in your life, possibly help fix pain or injury that you have now, and just move better, be stronger, be healthier. You know, I find right now the MAHA movement in general is very focused on food, which is fantastic, as it should be, focused on food and chemicals. But you know, when it comes to our bodies, we are holistic in nature. So movement, biomechanics, posture, absolutely important, because through bad posture and bad biomechanics, a lot of things can happen. Joint injury, joint pain, of course, but also inhibition of blood flow, inhibition of electrical signals going through our body, which could then inhibit organ function like our brain or our liver and other issues. Also, inhibition of breathing, which could then lead to less oxygen flowing in our body and more stress hormones being produced and yada yada, right? Everything's connected to everything else in some way, shape, or form. So over the next couple of months, I'll probably do a few videos similar to this, busting out the whiteboard, covering basics of biomechanics, movement, and posture. And also, if you would like individualized support, feel free to email me through either of my websites or DM me somewhere. Particularly Instagram or Twitter. Those are really the only two accounts I check DMs on. So anyway, getting into this, we're going to discuss basics of biomechanics and some simple principles of posture, common postural distortions, which include that forward head posture that you'll often see, sometimes very pronounced in people. Their head tips very far forward of their center of gravity. We'll talk about the rounded shoulders as well, often going along with that forward head. You see those two together. We'll also talk about some of the lower body, pelvic tilt. The more common is the anterior pelvic tilt, or when the front of the pelvis starts tipping forward, and you'll get the Donald Duck butt, you could call it, when you've got too much curve in that low back, too much lumbar lordosis, as it's called. And we will also focus on upper and lower cross syndromes, as they're called. So the muscles around the shoulder complex and the hip complex, because these are the main areas of your core that your extremities emanate from. You've got a lot of muscles around your shoulders and hips, keeping everything together. And we move in patterns, and from these patterns, you've got kind of the same muscles in most people that will get tight, patterns of muscles that will get tight, and then on the other side, patterns of muscles that'll get weak or too lengthened. So we'll talk about those cross syndromes as well, and then solutions you can do to fix those cross syndromes that these postural distortions like the forward head and the rounded shoulder emanate from. So that's on deck for this one. I'll do my best to keep it simple and keep it short. But before we get into talking about these postural distortions and the cross syndromes, there's some foundational principles to lay down in terms of the physics of our joint movement, how muscles move our joints, and how our spine is supposed to be situated to be that shock absorber for our whole body. So we'll start there, then we'll get into these cross syndromes. All right, so foundational principles before we move on. We're going to talk about the physics of how our muscles are supposed to move our bones around a joint, the yin-yang duality of muscles, tight versus weak, flexion versus extension, and then also how our bodies are supposed to be situated over our center of gravity to have everything in line. And this will begin to help you understand sort of those cross syndromes and how things get out of whack. So starting off with what we could call the instantaneous axis of rotation around our joints. So think of like this being your elbow or your knee. Using a hinge joint is a lot easier to visualize here because ball and socket joints like a shoulder, your hip, they move in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of muscles in them to get them moving in a variety of directions. But hinge joint, very simple. There's just really one way it's supposed to move. And then you have muscles around the bones on either side of the hinge joint that contract or lengthen to help move that extremity, help move that joint. So this one, we could say this is your elbow, here's your biceps, here's your triceps. These would be all the muscles of your forearm. And of course, when one side contracts, when bicep contracts, tricep lengthens. When tricep contracts, bicep lengthens. So that is our yin-yang duality of muscles. Now, due to modern world, but not necessarily the modern world, just how our bodies are structured, when we have certain muscles that are constantly contracted, they're constantly flexed, over time, that muscle will develop into what we could call a tonic muscle or a tight muscle. And on the contrary, the other side of that equation would be the extended muscle would naturally become more phasic or lengthened. So, especially due to our postures, we are constantly in sitting mainly. Sometimes they say sitting is the new smoking. No, it's not. Our bodies are made to sit, but it's the amount that we sit compared to not sitting, compared to standing or moving. And the fact that we are constantly at computers or at a desk, behind the wheel of a car, sitting on the couch, constantly in that flexed position. So fingers are flexed, especially around a keyboard. Our shoulders are flexed, rotated in, hovering around that keyboard or that wheel. Our hip flexors, muscles in front of the hip that bring your legs up, your femur up, those are constantly tonic, tightened. So we're constantly in these flexed positions. So what we need to do is figure out what muscles and where we need to strengthen or extend so we can uncontract those constantly contracted muscles. And then in terms of that instantaneous axis of rotation, think of a joint as like a fulcrum. So this applies to mechanics in industry. This is just a general physics principle that also applies to our joints. Our joint is supposed to be, the bones that move around the joint has a specific instantaneous axis of rotation, it's called, when everything is situated nice and neat. But when you have one side that over time, through repetition or through bad posture, like golf, for instance. Golf is notorious for screwing up people's backs because it's the same repetitive motion. It's the same repetitive motion. So you will get groups of muscles that get very contracted, very tonic, and then the other muscles get phasic. In any sport, really, any sport, because most sports involve rotation in one direction. throwing something. You got right-handed throwers. Their right hand will get very developed. Their left side does not. Or for me, right-handed kicker. Or whatever your habit might be, right? Women, for instance, typically carry their purse on one side of their body, sling it over, and then over the course of many hours, you'll get those muscles that develop in certain ways to deal with that issue. So anyway, when one side gets very tonic or tight, the other side gets very lengthened, it will begin to bring that joint out of its instantaneous axis of rotation and then start getting frozen shoulder. You start getting joints that don't move properly because the muscles are grabbing the bones in a way where they can't move in that joint properly or in their respective position they're supposed to be. So ideally, you figure out what muscles are too tight, stretch them, what muscles are too weak, exercise them, contract them, and then try to get that joint back situated nice and neat. Now, in terms of the spine, right? Don't judge my art. Homeboy's got his spine here where it's supposed to be, and when we are standing, imagine a line running down the side here. That line, for us to be in our center of gravity, each joint, the force of our body, the force of gravity pulling us down is being equally applied to all of our joints. So no joint is outside of its instantaneous axis of rotation. That force is being equally applied from the head down to the foot, and there's no muscles getting out of whack. That imaginary line, that center of gravity, should be going through the ear, through the ball of the shoulder there, through the ball of that hip joint, through the knee, and then through that ankle bone and down, right? That means center of gravity is going through all those joints, pulling us directly down. When we start, over the course of all the sitting we do, or all the bad habits, what have you, bad movement patterns, if we start getting that forward head posture, where you'll see like people's heads start tipping forward, that ear is a little forward, and then maybe their shoulders get rounded, so you've got that shoulder bone that starts going forward like that, or sometimes the knees can kind of collapse and cave in. You'll get that center of gravity not going properly through the knee joint. That means a bunch of muscles have to start hanging on. They have to start contracting to keep your head up, because instinctually, over the course of human evolution, right, we were hunter-gatherers. Our brain, our nervous system, instinctually will keep our eyes at the horizon. So if you start tipping forward, if your shoulder's round, you get that forward head posture, your unconscious mind will try to keep your eyes level with the horizon. So a lot of muscles, especially in the back of the neck, will be hanging on for dear life, trying to keep your head on straight. And here is one factoid about that forward head posture. For about every inch, your ear moves away from that center of gravity. That is about the extra weight of your head that your neck muscles have to deal with all day long, which is approximately 10 to 12 pounds. So for every inch your ear goes forward to that line, that center of gravity, that's an extra 12 pounds that your suboccipital muscles and the muscles of the back of your neck and your traps have to deal with to keep your eyes looking at the horizon. Wonder why a lot of people have such tight traps, such tight neck muscles. And then the thing is, when you get neck muscles constantly contracted like that, especially the suboccipital muscles right up under your skull there, when they are constantly contracted all day long, trying to keep your head on straight, what does that mean? That means less blood flow going through those muscles, which could invariably mean less blood flow going up into your head. So getting your posture correct means blood flows to the proper areas around your body better. It also means electrical signals from your brain are able to go through your nervous system better, because back to that instantaneous axis of rotation, if you have joints that are out of their proper area, those nerves that go through your body could get pressed on. And then that means less electrical signals going through all those nerves, less energy being sent down the chain to places it's supposed to go. So it's very important to keep your posture correct, to get that energy going through your spine properly, and then out through those nerves, through those little dendrites into your extremities. Not just blood, but electricity. And then blood carries oxygen, which is electricity as well. So, which is fuel for our body. Posture is very important. So that's just a little factoid about the forward head posture, and same thing with all the other joints as well. When they get outside of that center of gravity, that is more work those muscles around that joint have to do to keep you upright. So now that you kind of got that basic foundational understanding, let's move into looking at the shoulder complex and the hip complex and the common patterns of muscular inhibition, I guess we could call it. The common muscular patterns that become tight and weak around the shoulder and around the hip. Muscular imbalances, that's the word I was looking for. I couldn't think of that when recording the last segment. So let's look at the muscular imbalances around the shoulder region, that upper cross syndrome. I didn't mean to draw him as a hunchback here. Don't mind my artwork, but give me an A for effort. So the common postural distortions, the common patterns of movement or muscular imbalances around the shoulder region. The reason why we're calling it a cross is because the way that muscles get tonic and phasic, or tight and weak, is kind of in a cross pattern, as you will see when I draw it. By the way, at the end of this video, I'll get into some tests you can do with yourself, and then over the course of going through the crosses here, we'll talk about exercises you can do to fix these. So, with the upper cross, you've got your crosses. One is a tight line, one is a weak line. So, the weak line is, let's see here. I actually want this cross a little higher. I meant to kind of go through his neck. All right, we kind of want to go through the neck there for the better visualization. So, this is the weak line. This one is the tight line. The tight is traps and kind of the back of the neck muscles, like those suboccipital muscles I was talking about. And let's go down here. This is going to be your pecs, particularly your pec minor. The pec major is that big, meaty pec muscle that all the dudes in the gym are benching for, which, ironically, all the dudes are benching in the gym, right? Because they want to get the huge chest. And then what happens? They start getting terrible posture because they don't work those back muscles enough or know what to really do. So they end up screwing up their shoulders because they bench too much. So this is our tight line. Traps the pec minor, and I'm specifying the pec minor because that's the muscle that's kind of under the big meaty pec major muscle, and that's the one that connects to your shoulder that rotates your shoulders inward. So when that pec minor, when you're driving all the time, it's that pec minor that really gets tight and then will keep your shoulder in that position. So pec minor, traps back of the neck, those get tight or tonic, and the ones that get weak or phasic is this line, and up here, deep cervical flexors. Cervical means neck, your neck region. So the deep cervical flexors are the muscles that are sort of deep in the front of your neck that help to sort of keep your head back. So when those get weak and stretched in that forward head posture, and then towards the back, you've got a variety of muscles that sort of help keep your shoulder blades back and together. So your lower traps slash rhomboid slash a few other muscles kind of around the upper back region in between the shoulder blades that work to keep them together. Of course, when you get that rounded shoulder, and some dudes that are like really skinny with really bad posture, they take their shirt off and their shoulder blades are almost like sticking out, right? Like pointing out. That means they just have no muscles of the upper mid back to keep those shoulder blades tightened together. Now, what to do? 1 + 1 = 2 here. Tight line, you work to lengthen these, stretch them, and then with the weak line, you work to strengthen those, to contract them, right? And then when you're dealing with postural movements, fixing posture, it's really time under tension. It's not like doing 12 reps of a certain exercise, which, yeah, making sure your form is right when you're doing your rows or you're doing your bench presses or push-ups. That's definitely important in making sure you have proper posture in the long run. But really, you want almost body weight or no weight exercises whereby you are holding isometric poses for minutes at a time. So one great exercise to help fix the upper cross muscular imbalances is called the prone cobra. And if any of you are familiar with yoga, this might have been taught at some point in like your yoga classes. I've never been to yoga classes, but you can Google what the prone cobra looks like. And it's essentially prone cobra. You lay face down, you have your arms out, you rotate your thumbs towards the ceiling, and you're holding that position for as long as you can, ideally like a minute, and you do a few sets of just holding that for a minute. But it's a static pose you're doing that is contracting these muscles and really all the muscles, contracting these, helping to lengthen these. So that prone cobra, I'm a big fan of that exercise for undoing that rounded shoulder. And a few tests that you can do to see if, sometimes you can just look at yourself, but one test you can do to see, your center of gravity and how misaligned it might be. One easy test for the upper cross is just hold a couple pencils, right? Take a couple pencils and then hold them in your hands, relax yourself, and see how much those pencils turn inward in your hands. Ideally, they would be straight. You'd be holding those pencils at the side, and if you have decent balance around your shoulders, you don't have too much of a rounded shoulder, you'd be holding those pencils forward. But if you are relaxed and those pencils, are kind of turning toward each other, then you can kind of see how much your shoulders are internally rotating, if they're internally rotating too much. Also, another trick you can do is a plumb line test. And this is what you can do to see your center of gravity through your whole body. So, how much room do I have on my whiteboard here? So if we extend homeboy's torso out here, give him a donk. I drew that terribly, but imagine all of his joints are in line here. You can get a string and then just put a little washer, a little weight at the end of that string and hang that string from the ceiling all the way to the ground. And you can take a photo of yourself, because that string will be straight, standing. You ideally want to do this shirtless so you can see, but have that string intersecting you from the side, take a photo with that string going down, and then you can kind of see, do it relaxed. Don't be forcing yourself upright, but you want to relax yourself, and then see how that plumb line string is intersecting. You can also do the same thing from the front and back to see if you have any raised, any kind of imbalances around your shoulder, your hip, to see if you got like a raised shoulder or any kind of torque around your back or your front. So you can do that from the front and the back just to see how sort of balanced everything is. A lot of times, because people are right-handed, the left side of their back will be more developed than the right side. Because when you throw, this gets more into more complicated things, but sling patterns. So sling patterns are when you have groups of muscles that work together to twist. Because we twist by nature. We twist when we walk, our natural gait. We twist when we throw. We twist when we kick. So when you are throwing or kicking, you have the flexors of the right side, if you're right-handed, you are rotating your shoulder forward, and then the left side, your back is flexing to rotate you this way. So a lot of right-handed people, especially right-handed kickers, if they play any kicking sport and they're kicking a lot, the left side of their back will be more developed than the right side. And then, it depends on the habits as well, right? Like if you golf a lot, you'll have certain sling patterns that are developed because you're constantly, or say like a baseball player, you're constantly swinging. Or think of your job, right? Do you have any job where maybe you are a carpenter, so you constantly have a hammer and you're right-handed, so you're using your right hand, you will have imbalances between, say, right and left side, maybe those sling patterns with muscles in your legs and how they move your body with the muscles of your upper body. A little more complicated there, but something I just wanted to throw in. So that is the plumb line test. It's a very easy test you can do with yourself. Also with the upper cross syndrome, you can just kind of test how rounded your shoulders are by holding those pencils. But the plumb line test will be able to show you maybe how far your ear is going forward to that center of gravity, maybe how far your shoulder is forward, or if you have any kind of weird rotational elements in your knees or your ankle. So plumb line test, easy exercise to fix. The upper cross is that prone cobra. And there's a lot of other exercises you could do and whatnot, but you can just Google exercises to lengthen those things and strengthen those things. Okay, now let's get into the lower cross syndrome around the lumbo-pelvic hip region. Make self-care great again with All Good by Jessica Storm. All Good has only clean ingredients with purpose. Just premium products made with 100% grass-fed tallow and organic cold-pressed oils. No parabens, sulfates, toxins, BPAs, or PFAs. Zero junk. Personally handcrafted by Jessica in Florida, each small batch item is packaged in amber glass jars, ensuring it's all good both inside and out. Start simple with the lightweight Pure Whip Tallow for hydration, tighten up with the No-Tox Smoothing Serum, nourish your hair with the game-changing Tallow Hair Mask, and finish with the Tamed Hair Serum or Tallow Beard Balm for control and style. Ready for spring? Grab some Tallow sunscreen and Bug Out Balm to nourish while protecting your skin. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/allgood today and feel all good knowing your purchase supports Badlands Media. That's badlandsmedia.tv/allgood. All right, lower cross. Now that you have the idea of what the cross means, and there's a tight one and a weak one, let's go through the tight cross here. So this is our tight cross going this way. We have the low back muscles that typically get very tight in people. That is the quadratus lumborum, if I'm saying that right, the QL muscles, and then the erector spinae, and a lot of muscles of people's low backs tend to be too tight, so people will go into the gym and do their back extension exercises. Oh, I have a tight back. They think I must strengthen it by do back exercises. So they get on that little device, or the machine, do their back extensions, and they are strengthening muscles that are already a little too tonic, a little too strengthened. So they should be stretching them. And then down here, hip flexor tends to get very tight in people. And our weak cross is the deep abdominal muscles. We could say core. But when I write core here, I'm not talking about the six-pack abs. I'm talking about the deep abdominal wall muscles. And then on the other side of the weak axis, we have the glutes and hamstrings. So with this core, I want to focus on here for a moment. So let's draw that spine, right? You have your six-pack sexy muscles on the outside, and then you have other core muscles that sort of act as a natural weight belt. They kind of surround your spine and are a little deeper in your torso. These are the muscles we want to focus on. These are the ones that pretty much shut off when you're sitting all the time. And then when these muscles are weak and lengthened, then your spine can get all noodly in there and you don't have much support deep in that abdominal wall. Unfortunately, because so many people are just working out for aesthetics, all they're doing is their crunches to make their six-pack abs pop. But unfortunately as well, a lot of the crunch movements people are also activating their hip flexors, which are typically already too tight. So they're crunching. They're also activating their hip flexors when they do their crunches, and they're really not getting anywhere with their muscular imbalances. So when we're talking core exercises to strengthen the deep abdominal wall, we're talking like plank. Plank exercise is great for the core. Hold it for as long as you can. Do it a lot. And then there's a whole lot more exercises you can do to work on those stabilizing deep abdominal core muscles, but you can Google's your friend here, or your resident YouTube sports scientist or what have you. With the low back, a lot of exercises you can do to lengthen that, and then with the hip flexor. Now, I guess a little more advanced here, but the thing with the hip flexor and the hamstring, it gets a little more complicated with those because they don't just get tight, but they also get weak as well. So what you want to do with the hip flexor and the hamstring is you want to do eccentric exercises, or exercises where you are loading the muscle, but then lengthening it while you're loading it. So this is why a lot of people who just like sit on the ground and they stretch their hamstring, they might get relief for a few minutes, a little bit, but it's not really solving their issues. What you want to do to strengthen and stretch your hamstring is like holding a weight and doing Romanian deadlifts, or any kind of deadlift variant, straight-legged deadlift, because not only are you stretching the hamstring, but you're loading it with weight as well. So I'm a huge fan of deadlifts for exercises, especially corrective deadlifts. If you do the deadlift properly, which 90% of people don't, it is a very complex movement, working your whole body. But if you do a corrective deadlift properly, it's amazing for your posture. A lot of people say, oh, it's bad for your back, don't do deadlifts. Yeah, you don't have to load it up with weight and do a 1 rep max. You can do more corrective deadlifts, and if you really focus on your posture, it can be amazing for you. And then when you get your nervous system accustomed to moving properly in that motion, then you can load up the weight and get your form right, and they're not bad for your back at all, in fact. So big fan of deadlifts, and shoot, maybe I'll do a separate video on how to deadlift properly. But anyway, hamstrings, eccentric loading to strengthen and stretch those. Glutes get very weak in a lot of people because, of course, when we're sitting, our hips are flexed, so that glute gets lengthened, and a lot of people just have no ass. They got no ass. So do your glute strengthening exercises. And then, of course, a lot of people skip leg day. And then, of course, and this is primarily for the ladies, but unfortunately, aesthetic culture, right? We're so sex-driven that what happens, dudes as well, but mainly ladies, ladies are wearing high heels all the time, and when you're wearing high heels, that will get your ankle extended, but also end up tipping your pelvis forward, just the way that the forces are applied up the chain. So heels tend to exacerbate anterior pelvic tilt. So front of the pelvis tilts forward, anterior pelvic tilt, which then causes more curve of the low back, more lordosis, and then you get the Donald Duck butt, right? And then you've got some women who their posture is miserable because not only are they wearing high heels all the time, but they're also just trying to stick their ass out to look good to guys. So a lot of chicks will just get totally screwed up backs because of, I don't know, just trying to be fancy. And then Guys as well will tend to get very predominant Donald Duck butts or anterior pelvic tilts because they just do all the crunches for their sexy six-pack. They don't do much for the deep abdominal wall, and then, yeah, a lot of issues there too. So there's that. And then you got the hip flexor there, and the hip flexor also gets a little complicated because certain portions of our hip flexor are weak and other portions are too contracted. So, but generally, hip flexor is one that you want to lengthen to help get that pelvis back into proper alignment. And I think that's about it. I think that's everything I wanted to cover with this crash course on posture. And again, this is a very basic principle. I mean, we only talked about groups of about 8 muscle groups. You know, there's a lot more muscles when it comes to internal and external rotation of the hips, and with ways that the shoulder tends to get imbalanced as well, the hips and shoulders. Again, because they're ball and socket joints, you've got a lot of muscles around them that work to rotate them in different directions. We only looked at a human being from the side. You know, we did not really assess rotations and different things. So this is very basic. You can get a lot more complex with it because, of course, we got 200 bones and 600 some muscles, and then a whole fascial system, a web that keeps everything together. It can get a lot more complex, but that's just the basics of the upper and lower cross and common postural distortions: forward head, rounded shoulder, pelvic tilt, and all that jazz. Yeah, I think going forward, maybe I'll talk a bit about corrective deadlifting. Also, maybe I'll look at like the front and the back as well, because if you're walking around with duck feet, it's very bad. You know, if your feet tend to walk like this, that's just a recipe for knee injury and problems. So duck feet is indicative of a lot of imbalances around the hips, weaknesses and tightnesses. And if you're walking around with duck feet, that's sending a lot of force abnormally, not just through the ankle, but through the knee as well. And then with the shoulder region too, yeah, I'll probably do another video on this because there's just a lot of common habits that we don't think about. They're unconscious. That's the fascinating thing about posture, is that it's an unconscious thing, but by becoming conscious, you know, like me talking about this, I know a lot of you sitting in your chair sitting a little more upright simply because of getting these unconscious principles into your awareness. But there's a lot of things we do we don't really realize, but that do have an impact. So for instance, like guys who keep their wallet under one ass cheek, you know, that wallet can be maybe even an inch thick for some people. So you're having 1 inch under one side of your pelvis, and then if you go on a long drive with it, or if you're sitting all day in a chair, that pelvis could be leaning a little weird after having your wallet under one side for a long time. So that's just one example. I think I mentioned earlier, women who carry their purse over one side all the time, and if it's a heavy purse they're carrying, a big heavy purse, then they can get a little bit of a lean from that. High heels are very bad, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of high heels, but wearing them for a long time, all the time, like if you're going to the office every single day, Monday through Friday for 8 hours, wearing high heels the whole time, you are just asking for Achilles issues and pelvic issues, back issues from that. So there's a lot of things we don't really realize are causing problems, but they are causing problems. So I think I'll make this a series, maybe do one video like this for a MAHA Living show every some odd weeks. I don't know, once a month, once every other month, probably. Not too many, but there'll be a few. So anyway, again, if you got any questions, if you want individualized help with exercise or fixing joint pains or anything, feel free to email me or DM me. I'm more than happy to send you more information, send you YouTube videos of proper exercises, or possibly even work with you one-on-one if that's a right fit for us. Email me, DM me somewhere, more than happy to help. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video on postural distortions and the basics of biomechanics. Thank you for watching. like this video. Nate and I will be back on Friday, MAHA News live stream, and then Nate will be back here on MAHA Living next week, and we have a fun few episodes in store for the next few weeks. So we'll see you guys Friday.
I don't say this lightly. This lotion changes people.
My knuckles would actually start to crack. Started using the soft disclosure lotion, and I am very impressed. Even within just a few days, I've noticed a tremendous difference.
That's not a script. That's what happens when something actually works.
It puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Yeah, that line keeps coming up. Because when you don't use it, your skin starts acting up.
Every single ingredient in soft disclosure is intentionally chosen. There's no filler ingredients. It is not like this BS product where they have a bunch of ingredients. Every ingredient listed is for a purpose.
Over 65-star reviews for the lotion alone. Not influencers, not actors, just people whose skin finally shut up. Soft disclosure lotion. Once you try it, you'll understand why people won't stop talking about it. Visit softdisclosure.com and use code Badlands and get 10% off.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.